All right, welcome to another live puzzle solving session. So this time we're looking at a puzzle between the 1600 and 1800 range. These are intermediate level puzzles, so they carry some challenge, but they're not super long or difficult. So here in the pre-puzzle position, I kind of like to analyze the position before our opponent made the mistake that led to the puzzle. Our opponent has a pretty safe king for the most part. The f7 pawn is under attack by our bishop. And material looks like it's even. We both have a knight and a bishop and two heavy pieces, and the pawns are completely equal as well. Our opponent has ideas of maybe attacking us on the kingside with his knight and his bishop already well positioned in that area, and then the queen can potentially get in as well with moves like queen f5, not queen e6 because it'll just get captured by the bishop. And I think maybe with the move f5, he's thinking about creating a pawn storm, pushing that pawn to f4 at some point, maybe rook to f8 and supporting that move, and the knight also looking at that square. So he has some aggressive intentions in mind. Coming back to this position, our rook is underdeveloped here on a1. It's not in the battle, whereas all of his pieces are kind of like in a position of advantage. So let's look at the puzzle position now a little bit deeper. The knight is stuck on the edge of the board, and it can not go anywhere safe at the moment, except for f6. But if it went to f6, our knight can take it, and after g takes f6, we have queen takes f6, queen takes h6, check. And that move looks pretty devastating. But we can't really kick this knight with g4, because after f takes g4, f takes g4, he can simply play queen takes g4 check even, and we don't have attack on the knight anymore. And in fact, we're the ones who are getting attacked by his queen. f5 also removes the target of our bishop, and it attacks our knight. We have a move like knight c5 that could attack the enemy queen, but his queen is not easy to be forked or anything like that. So that attack at an initial glance doesn't yield anything, although we could potentially have ideas of even jumping to e6 at some point, supported by our bishop, if his rook were to, if his queen were to vacate effect of e6. So my initial scan of the board didn't yield any significant findings. I don't even have really a great candidate move to look for. Another idea is the fact that his bishop is potentially in trouble here on h3 because the move f5 has now shut off a couple of the retreat squares of his bishop. It's shut off f5 and it's shut off e6. And we can attack that bishop by playing knight to f2. The bishop can't go to g2, it can't go to g4 because of this pawn that's antagonizing that square. So knight to f2 is the first candidate move that's really jumped out at me. And if we play that move, can he generate any counterplay? He can't attack our queen. He can't really create any threats on our king because our queen is guarding all of the squares along the e file here. Rook to e3, potentially hitting this pawn is a threat. But I think we would just take the bishop and let him have the pawn, and he's still not really doing anything particularly dangerous. We can always get rook to e1 and then rook to f1 to secure our position. He can't really do anything with his knight to challenge us. Knight to f4 doesn't really work. He can retreat with his knight to f6, but that doesn't create any threats. And he can't trap our bishop or anything like that either. So knight f2 looks like a very strong move. Let's just take one more look at the position before we commit to making that move to make sure that our opponent is completely devoid of any counter chances. Devoid, rather. So, can he do anything with his queen? Queen to d6, maybe f4, knight takes, pawn takes, and then, okay, so that looks like a move actually. So knight to f2, he goes f4, uncovering defense of the bishop by the queen. And in that case, I think we can just push our pawn to g4 and block that effect. And then that would also hit the knight, so we would gain a tempo. And let's say he goes knight to f6, and then we take the bishop on h3. And if he were to try to, that was my cat, if he were to try to sacrifice the bishop on g4, we can just take with the knight, or with the pawn even. And his queen can't really get in on g4 because we have two of our pieces defending that square. So it looks like that move is covered as well. And I don't see any other way that he can add defense to that bishop. So let's give knight to f2 a try. Okay, and that was the correct move. Hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you tomorrow.